This is Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere, chapter 23 and 24. I must have looked a sight to that man. All of us sat there for the longest time staring at him like we wasn't expecting company. Then Mama started to shake, and the quivers traveled from Mama's head up Celia's arms, but she still had her hands lost in Mama's hair. Mama pulled loose from Celia's fingers and stood on shaky legs, and she pointed at the water in the direction where Daddy and Georgie had floated away, and her hand was trembling so bad I had to keep myself from reaching up to hold it still. My husband and son, Mama managed to say, but then she shuddered with upset. The man looked in the direction that Mama had pointed, and he pulled off his black and gold ball cap and hooked one of his thumbs in the tattered strap of his blue jean overalls. Then he wiped the top of his almost bald head with the back of his arm, and he put the hat back on. Yes, ma'am, I've been getting a lot of that from folks. He hung his head and shook it back and forth a couple of times too many. When we looked back up at us, he squinted at the twins. You got babies up there? He said like maybe he was telling us something we didn't know. Before he introduced himself, he tossed up bottles of water, and it was the most delicious water I've ever had. It was clean and sweet and cold, and my mama cried grateful tears, and she kept saying thank you while we took long gulps. When he threw the fried Hubig's pies to us, Mama reacted like she'd been thrown a bag of gold. Kayla tore into hers before I could even get the wrapper all the way off, and she had the whole thing gone before we had a chance to thank the generous man. I ate about half of mine, chewing every sugary bite real slow, while the taste buds popped and grabbed hold of all the crusty, creamy, lemony flavors. Kayla stared at me with her mouth open, eyes glued to my food, globs of lemon filling from her forehead to her elbows, and I was starving. I could have ate at least 100 of them flaky fried pies right there on the spot, but when I seen the hunger showing on my baby sister's face, I took one more small bite and then gave the rest to her. She didn't say thanks, but the smile let me know I'd done the right thing. Celia unwrapped hers like all gentle like, and she took one more bite and moaned, chewing at the same time. Then, like in slow motion, she folded the edges of the wrapper back over the top of what was left and tucked it down inside her book sack. She took a careful step closer to the edge, and Mama grabbed her arm. Are you here to rescue us, mister? Well, I reckon y'all need rescuing, that's for sure. He had a smile that I liked. I can't leave, Mama said in a panic. But Mama, Celia said, we have to leave. We can't stay here. Mama looked at Celia with her eyes full of worry and confusion. Ma'am, the man said directly to Mama. Mama tore her eyes from Celia and planted them on me. I don't know what to do, Armani. Tears were flowing, and I didn't know what to say. My own eyes were blurry, and Celia stared at me with her face all hopeful. The sweaty, sweeping-looking twin sat there on the hot roof, too pitiful to even fuss. And I looked down at the plump white man in the tiny boat with the smile I'd taken a liking to. I caught a glimpse of something yellow on his cap, and I rubbed my eyes with my fist and got rid of the blurriness. There, right on top of the wore-out ball cap, was the yellow butterfly that had been resting its wings on my boot a few minutes earlier. I couldn't take my eyes off it. We sure would appreciate it, sir, if you could get us off this roof. And as soon as I said the words, the butterfly fluttered away, and chill bumps raced down my arms. Mama moaned. I took her hand. Mama, we have to get the twins somewhere safe. Her eyes were closed, and she couldn't stop crying. I promise, Mama. I said like I was the mama and she was the child. We'll tell the police or someone about Daddy and Georgie. A cry got caught in my throat. But we have to go with this nice man. Celia was crying quiet, and I kept my teary eyes on Mama, and I took a hold of Celia's hand and walked her to the edge of the roof. I sat down on my legs hanging over the side, and Celia climbed up on me, and I whispered in her ear, I'm going to slide you down, okay? And a tear rolled down my face. I trust you, Armani, Celia said in a whisper cry. The man in the tiny silver boat reached up and slid my little sister off my lap and into the arms of the stranger. His name was Mr. Oscar Dupree. He's the man who saved us from wasting away on that roof. After Celia, I slid Kayla down, and as soon as that baby thunked into the bottom of the boat, she grabbed a hold of Mr. Oscar's leg and made it clear she wasn't letting go for nothing. When I asked Mama to give me Colleen so she could get on the boat next, she turned from me and started to cry all over again. You go on without me, she sputtered. Mama, you have to come with us. I swiped at a useless tear, wishing she would stop being so hard-headed. I real careful got to my feet, and there was a fear and sadness that carved into my mama's beautiful face that filled me with knowing that I'd figured I'd always have. Armani, she said, nodding her head, talking like she was begging me to keep a secret. Take the girls and go. She looked past my shoulder and down at the little boat. Mama, we ain't leaving without you. And I looked at her straight in the eyes, worried. I looked her straight in the eyes, my words coming from my heart. I can't leave without your daddy. She took a deep breath, and Georgie, and Mama Jean and her world caving in was the most horrible thing I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't know how to make it better for her. But Mama, I finally found my voice. Please, Mama, I can't do this. I can't leave you. Celia was crying loud down in the boat. Excuse me, ma'am, Mr. Oscar said, clearing his throat. I know it ain't none of my business, but Mama, I can't do this without you. I need you. I was near a full-blown panic, and Mama closed her eyes and shook her head back and forth, and I leaned up on her chest and wrapped my arms around her and Colleen. I whispered, Mama, Celia, Kayla need you too. I can't take care of them proper without you. Please. She opened her eyes and looked at me, and her face was wet with tears. As plain as Mama has ever said anything, she said, I'm sorry, Armani, but I can't. I can't leave them. And she stood tall and sniffed, and her tears stopped flowing. But you know what I say, and you get on that boat. But Mama, you can do this, Armani. I have faith in you. You're my special darling. You're strong. I know the children will be fine with you. She wrapped herself around me and squeezed for a quick, long second. I didn't want that hug to end, not ever. When I looked up at her, she smiled and said, Your daddy's going to be so proud of you, Armani. I looked out at my sisters sitting in the boat, and they were both crying and looking so pitiful and small, and somewhere deep inside I knew I had to get on that boat. I never paid no attention to where my heart sits up inside my chest, but I wasn't going to ever be a mystery to me again. The breaking of it was a feeling like 100,000 cinder blocks piled up on top of me, making so I couldn't breathe. I kissed Colleen and gave Mama a kiss on her cheek, and I reached behind my neck and unhooked the locket that Mima gave me right before she died. I stayed fixed on Mama's watery eyes until I had the compass locket sitting pretty around her neck. Then I made my way over to the edge of the roof in Mima's clunky boots, and I sat down all wobbly, almost falling headfirst into the smelly, murky water. Mr. Oscar reached up and helped me bring me aboard his dinky boat. He wiped his tears away, and I was glad to see that his heart matched his smile. He told us to sit and stay still, and I didn't take his advice. If I was gonna I didn't take his advice. If I was going to leave Mama and my baby brother on a roof, I was at least going to stand, and so I could watch her for as long as possible. Ma'am, I'll send word regarding you and the baby. I'll try to come round and check on you if I can, Mr. Oscar Dupree said, looking at Mama. Take care of them, Mama blubbered, crying wide open. Yes, ma'am, Mr. Oscar said, and then his foot pushed up against the side of our lopsided house, shoving us into the rolling water. Mama, Celie wailed. Mama, Kayla howled over and over, and she reached her short, thick arms up and out, like Mama could stretch across the water and nab her right out of the boat. Celie held her tight to the best she could until Kayla took to kicking and squirming. Kayla plopped out of Celie's arms and landed with a tiny thud on the back onto the bottom of the boat. And she screamed, and I looked down knowing I should pick her up, but I couldn't move. Mr. Oscar scooped Kayla up and went straight into a bouncy sing-song and shh, baby, shh. All I could do was stare at Mama holding onto Mima's compass locket and Colleen wondering why God was taking away my family. This is chapter 24. I had my eyes fixed on Mama, still standing on the roof with Colleen, and Mr. Oscar Dupree's boat made a clunk sound, and we'd run into something. I turned just in time to see a big old tire, like the kind that goes on a school bus or 18-wheeler, bouncing off the front of Mr. Oscar's boat. Will you look at that? Mr. Oscar mumbled under his breath. Armani, look, Steely said, pointing at the sight. The Bowman kids, clinging for dear life up inside up inside a tire boat. All four of the kids stared at us. They didn't say hey or nothing. They just slowly drifted past us. They wore pajamas and were even filthier than usual. I tore my eyes away from them and stole a look at Celie and Kayla. Right then, I knew the only difference between them Bowman kids and us was the color of our skin, and I couldn't help but wonder if their daddy was floating somewhere, or if their mama was standing stubborn on a roof. The littlest Bowman kid lifted his arm like it weighed a ton and tried to wave a tired wave, and tears fell from his droopy blue eyes, running streaks through the grime on his face. Celie waved back all slow and started a new flood of tears all of her own before burying her face in the top of her book sack. You know them? Mr. Oscar asked. Without taking my eyes off the tire full of kids, I answered, No, sir, not really. They just ride our bus. I ain't sure why, but right then, maybe because of the look of the oldest boy's eyes, I felt like maybe I did know them. Armani, Mommy hollered off in the distance, jumping up and down, waving one arm in the air. Celie, Armani, hurry, come back. Mama screamed. Something had Mama's in hysterics. Go back, I yelled at Mr. Oscar. We can't go back, the man said. I promised your Mama I'd get your kids off somewhere safe. Celie stood up the little boat and tilted to one side. Please, Mr. Oscar said. She said in that sweet way of hers. Without another word, Mr. Oscar Dupree turned his boat around. He zigzagged around floating trees and telephone poles and chunks of people's houses and lots of things I could or couldn't want to. I could or didn't want to recognize, and he headed back to Mama. Wheezing, loud wheezing, a sound I never thought I'd be grateful to hear. It's on account of that horrible sound that Mama was forced to come to her senses. No one had to talk to her into getting on the boat. Mama all but jumped right off that roof when we came up alongside the house. What's going on with that boy? Mr. Oscar looked like he was about to kick all of us off the boat just for being too much trouble. Mama's voice was loud and strong. He's having an asthma attack and the inhaler's empty. I have to get to the hospital. I like the sound of Mama being strong. I can't take you to a hospital. Mr. Oscar looked nervous and wore out like the rest of us. I hear they got some Red Cross folks scattered about, he said, steering the boat into the direction of safety. Yes, take us there, Mama said. But Mr. Dupree, please hurry. The man looked at Colleen, struggling to breathe in Mama's arms, and he turned his dirty ball cap around backwards and stood up tall and straight, poking his extra round belly out. Yes, ma'am, he said, and nodded at Mama. He handed her an ice cold water from his styrofoam cooler. Don't worry, y'all. That young boy's going to be fine once we get him cooled down. The man was right, because after Mama rubbed water bottles from the cooler along Colleen's back and face, the wheezing all but stopped. Now, y'all sit down and let's see how fast we can get old Nessie going. Who's Nessie? Celia asked. She pulled out her stashed Hubig's pie and the tiniest nibble and slid it back into her sack. Mr. Oscar tapped the side of the boat. This here's Nessie, darling. She might not look like much, but she gets me up and down the bayou just fine. Celia giggled. That's funny. You named your boat Nessie. Yep, Mr. Oscar said. Then he looked down at my sister and gave her that smile of his and reminded me of Santa Claus. Old Nessie outrun 4 gators in one day. Yeah, she did. Really? She believed everything, Celia. While they went on talking, my eyes met Mama's, and neither one of us said anything. It was like we were talking to each other without words. Something had changed between us, and I could feel it as much as I could feel the weight of Kayla putting my legs to sleep.